Hi guys, welcome back to the Welsh Political Explainers YouTube channel. My name is Lewis and I'm a recent politics graduate from Cardiff University. I started the channel because I felt there was an extreme lack of online content relating to Welsh history, Welsh geography and Welsh politics online, so I wanted to change that just a little. So that's the main reason as to why I started the channel. So in this video I wanted to make a bit of a follow-up to a previous video where I discussed how Brexit specifically affected Wales, as I often think that Wales is an underlooked part of the UK in discussions surrounding Brexit. So in this follow-up video to that one, I wanted to look at how Wales specifically voted during the 2016 European Union membership referendum in the UK, and how the vote sort of differed between Wales's different sort of geographic areas, and see if there's sort of some differences and similarities between the different regions across Wales that we can sort of draw upon. A total of 1,628,054 votes were cast. Total votes were cast across the whole of Wales in the 2016 Brexit referendum, with 854,572 votes, or 52.53%, being cast in support of the Leave campaign. Meanwhile, 772,347 votes, or 47.47% of the total votes cast were in support of remaining inside the European Union at the 2016 referendum across Wales. Looking at this map, we can see the vast majority of council areas across Wales voted to leave the European Union, with only 5 council areas of the total 22 council areas across Wales revealing majorities in favour of remain, while the other 17 council areas across Wales had small or significant majorities in support of the Leave camp. Overall, the majority who voted in favour of leaving the EU in Wales was just 82,000 total votes, or 5.06% of all the votes cast in Wales. This compares with 51.89% of voters across the whole UK who voted to leave the EU. It also compares with 15,188,406, or 53.4% of the votes cast in England for the very same purpose. Meanwhile, this compares with 1,661,191 votes, or 62% of the votes in Scotland, who supported remaining inside the European Union in Scotland. Finally, voters in Northern Ireland voted to remain in the EU with 470,707 total votes for the camp, or the Remain camp, or 55.8% of the overall votes in Northern Ireland voting to remain inside the European Union. Cardiff, Ceredigion, Gwynedd, Monmouthshire and the Vale of Glamorgan were the only council areas or boroughs from across the whole of Wales who voted Remain, with Monmouthshire and the Vale of Glamorgan only voting to remain by very tiny margins of 50.4% and 50.7% respectively. The strongest Leave votes were in post-industrial areas from across South Wales valleys, such as Blaen y Gwent, Torfaen and Caerphilly, which voted to leave the European Union by votes of 62%, 59.8% and 57.6% respectively. Cardiff was the council area which showed the largest support for Remain, with voters in the Welsh capital giving around 60% of the total support to the Remain campaign. Rural Welsh-speaking areas such as Gwynedd and Ceredigion showed the next highest levels of support for Remain outside Cardiff, with each of them voting to remain by 58.1% and 54.6% respectively. With Cardiff revealing the highest Remain vote in Wales, there would appear to be a bit of a rural to urban divide, with voters in less urban areas supporting the Leave campaign by much higher percentages. However, this isn't necessarily true, as Wales's second and thirdest largest cities, Swansea and Newport, actually voted to leave the European Union by margins of 51.5% and 56% respectively. Some scholars have said that the higher levels of income, ethnic diversity and educational attainment in Cardiff, when compared to Swansea and Newport, are the biggest reasons as to why those two cities voted to leave, meanwhile Cardiff did not. So the case for the urban-rural divide may not be as clear as it initially may seem. A similar case is often attributed to Monmouthshire and the Vale of Glamorgan, as these two council areas are typically seen to be somewhat wealthier than many other parts of Wales. Although another reason also given as to why these areas voted the way they did is because they have relatively large agricultural industries and so benefited more from EU policies such as the Common Agricultural Policy or CAP, which is essentially a huge EU subsidy given to European farmers from the various European level institutions. So this in turn could have influenced how many voted in agricultural areas from across Monmouthshire and the Vale of Glamorgan. So now that we've taken a look at how the different geographic areas of Wales voted, I also wanted to take a look at why they voted in the way that they did. As we've identified, many areas across Wales voted to leave the European Union by relatively large margins. We really need to dig into this to identify why Wales voted the way in which it did at the 2016 referendum. Firstly, there are a lot of people born in England who have moved to Wales later in life, with 650,000 residents of Wales being born in England at the time of the 2016 referendum. This represented 21% of the total Welsh population, and nearly a quarter of these residents were aged over 65. Areas of Wales with high percentages of English-born residents voted to leave the European Union by relatively larger margins, with Wrexham and Powys being key examples of this. Research has actually shown that these English-born residents of Wales were enough to sway the referendum's result in Wales to leave, as it only took 82,000 total votes to achieve this outcome in Wales. Secondly, other research has shown that identity was another major factor which determined or influenced how people in Wales voted during the 2016 referendum, with areas where residents identify more strongly as Welsh rather than British or English being more likely to vote Remain in various different capacities. Although this rule appears to be somewhat hard and fast, as areas like the South Wales valleys produce the highest leave percentages, but also have some of the highest natively born Welsh populations. Thirdly, social deprivation appears to be the most important factor affecting how people voted in the 2016 referendum, with some of Wales's poorest areas by GDP per capita producing the highest leave votes. According to data from Europa, West Wales and the South Wales valleys both have a somewhat low GDP per capita of £23,000. These were areas which coincidentally produced the largest leave votes, while areas such as Cardiff and the Vale of Glamorgan, which had relatively higher GDP per capita of around £30,000 per annum, produced relatively large Remain votes. So it would appear that there is some correlation between GDP per capita and regions which produced the highest or lowest percentages for Leave and Remain respectively. That concludes everything that I wanted to talk about in this video. As we've seen, Wales did indeed vote to leave the European Union during the 2016 referendum. However, it's too simple to say that Wales voted for this as a single territorial unit, as there's some differentiation between different geographic areas across Wales, with areas with higher GDP per capita such as Cardiff and Welsh-speaking majorities such as Gwynedd actually voting to remain inside the European Union. Meanwhile, most of the rest of Wales voted for the exact opposite of this. I hope that this video goes some way in starting a more nuanced debate as to how Wales voted during the 2016 referendum, as I think that Wales is an often overlooked area of the UK in relation to Brexit discussions that take place in other parts of the UK, such as Scotland or England. Thank you so much for watching the video. If you made it to this point, I really appreciate it. I hope you found the video useful or interesting. If you found the video useful, then please share it with another curious friend. I'd really appreciate it. Also, if you enjoyed, please make sure to subscribe to the channel because it'll make sure you don't miss the next video whenever I get around to uploading it. On a final note, if you're interested in keeping up with me, then give me a follow over on Twitter at Welsh Explainers or over on Instagram at Welsh Political Explainers. So thanks very much again for taking the time to watch the video. Hopefully you enjoyed it and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks very much. Bye.